you're going to tell me about a consistent way that you teach kids to attack problems, basically in math and science.
Yeah, right. Okay, what I'm going to show you is just a graphic organizer that we use that helps us to create consistency with our kids and really enables us to help our students to learn to manipulate data. That to me is a very important thing for our kids to learn. That's a life skill. Those are things when we're talking about a 21st century learner, those are things we have to teach our kids to do, is to manipulate data. So many times when you're specific to math, we'll take, specifically speaking to math, we hear a kid's got a concern with math. He's bad at math. The teacher says he's bad at math. The parent says he's bad at math. But it's not just about being bad at math. What part of math is this student having concerns, issues with, whatever that may be? If we're not deliberate about the process we use to help uncover these things, then we can't be as deliberate as we need to be when we're being very student specific. The graphic organizer that we use, and this is the one that's been adopted by our campus, we just call it the Look, Know, Solve. And what the students...
Look, know, solve.
Yep. The L stands for what are we looking for? The K is what do we know? And the S is where we show our work. There is actually an extended version of this that some teachers use, or they will add to it, and they add a checkbox down here on the bottom. But again, one thing that I think is important to make note of is that as you work through this process and you progress through this, that's not always good for every kid right away. I've found that over the years, it's better to start out and then you add bells and whistles as you progress through that. And again, that's what makes it very unique and student specific, is then you can tweak things and add it to where it's beneficial and it's prescriptive for that student. And so, again, L is what we're looking for, K is what we know, S is where we solve. And so literally we will have the students write the question and literally write it out. And so if the question is...
Whatever they're asking in the problem. Then
whatever they're asking, like we've got a question here, what was the length of each piece of rope in inches? The kid would write, what is the length of each piece of rope in inches?
So each time in the look part, we're going to rewrite the question.
Literally rewrite it.
Literally rewrite it.
And here's the why. Because oftentimes we get, there's techniques and they work for some kids. I won't disagree with that. But sometimes kids will take a highlighter and they get highlighter happy. And they don't truly acknowledge that question. They think they did, but then we go back and when we uncover things, then we notice that, well, the reason that this child, it's not I got a math problem, it's not an order of operation problem, it's not a going through the processes, whatever make up that multiplication, division, whatever it may be, but I didn't even acknowledge the question correctly. And sometimes that's issues with certain kids. The know is where we actually gather the data. It's all the information that's within that question that is important to help us solve that question. And so, in this case, if we had rope that is 14 35/100 inches, that would be an important piece of data. Sometimes, and we all know this, sometimes there's extraneous data that's put in there. Maybe it's 3 dogs. And depending on the student, some students prefer to write every piece of data in there that's within that. That way they've broken it apart. They've acknowledged it. Because sometimes it's too much for a student to go just look at the story problem and to line things out. Sometimes that's too much. Sometimes for them to process it, they need to break it apart into its pieces. And so then those students will go through, then they'll ask themselves, okay, do I really need 3 dogs? No, I don't need 3 dogs. So they'll put a line through it. As they come down here to solve it, oftentimes we'll have them put an order of operation box. All of these things that the student is doing in this process, from the look to the know to the solve, as the teacher, that allows me to go through and really pinpoint specific areas that this student is struggling with. Or it also helps me to give good affirmation to the student, hey, you're on point. You're where you need to be. As the process progresses, we kind of use a couple of different techniques, and it really depends on the preference of the teacher on how you go about doing that. Sometimes, as you initially introduce this concept, you'll actually put it, and we use a dot system. And so where they put look, if they got that correct, you might put a dot, and that tells that student, hey, I'm on the right track. As they go to the know, you might notice, you know what, they're missing things. So you just put a simple X. You don't have to have an immediate conversation with that student at that time. They know that if I get an X, that means something is not right there. Then that student will go back to it. Sometimes during that moment when that X happens, sometimes that's a perfect opportunity to take what I like to refer to as like tier 1 to tier 3 instruction. We're doing a big lesson on whatever it may be, but then we have an opportunity to come in and give a student a little nudge. We're not giving them an answer, but we're just helping guide them, guide their thinking, guide their schema, guide that background knowledge. We're giving them just a little bump. And doing it in the moment while it's happening, and again, allow them to have the opportunity to go back and correct that. And so then oftentimes then students will go back, they'll make a correction. If they get it correct, and when you come back, you put in a dot. That tells that student right away, hey, you're on track. I don't even have to say anything to that student. I can do this in a full class of several students in one classroom, and use that process as I go and visit with each student. What it tells me as the teacher is right away I'm able to see where our kids are, see where our areas of our concern are, and as they're practicing, as they're getting more exposure to these, I can see it in real time and make sense of it with the students in real time. If they get them right on all three, naturally I put a dot, dot, dot. Eventually, as we progress through the process and the students get better at this, then what we do is 1 dot per problem, or 1 X per problem. Then that child becomes a problem-solving investigator. Okay, wait, I got an X. Where is it? I go reevaluate all of my work. Then again, allows me to go very student-specific, go tier 3 with that student, give them some, help them to make connections, background knowledge, things of that nature, and help guide them. If they miss it a second time, I'll put a line through it. If they get it on that next time, I'll put the dot. That tells me that student missed that 2 times and they got it right the 3rd time. And then it allows me to inventory that student's thinking, inventory where that student's having issues, concerns. It'll help me be very specific in how I approach the specific TEK that child is struggling with. And again, it's a great means to just provide additional exposure to the students. What other questions?
So down in the solve, this is where we do the work.
This is where we would do the work. And
Okay.
so this particular question was about 14. There was actually 7. They wanted 7 equal links. So 7 equal links. How much they wanted the total length, so the student would have to come in here and we would know that they are going to
Right.
multiply.
Okay.
And so then they would go ahead and figure that out, and then if they get the answer correct.
And you've used this primarily in math and science.
We used it primarily in math.
Right.
When I was over at Whittier, we used it as our teacher
Okay.
kind of morphed it into a science thing, and actually we've tried to do that as well here.
Okay.
So you're saying your goal for me with this is to get me not where I'm just copying the question, but to actually get to where I'm rephrasing the question.
Ultimately, the goal would be for each individual student, as they are ready, to be able to go in and phrase that question in a way that makes more sense to them, could be a more concise statement, but most importantly, whoever came by to read that would be able to make sense of it and understand what the expectation was for that problem.